This is CBC Vancouver News.
There's a lot of heartache seeing what's going on in the Middle East.
It's really important for us to stand together.
Faith leaders set aside religious beliefs to offer a collective call for peace as the war in the Middle East drags on. Plus,
we are going to burn them out. And we're also already running into a retention and recruitment issue.
Vancouver firefighters sound the alarm about burnout. What's behind a rise in mental health concerns among first responders? Also,
after leaving a message, you can hang up.
There was a good hour and 20 minutes where people were trying to get a hold of me.
Dozens of missed calls later, this Prince George man is the last to hear he'd won a pretty good prize, a brand new house. Good evening, I'm Tanya Fletcher. Thanks for joining us. Well, Gaza's desperate situation tonight includes fears of mass starvation. Israel has indicated this fight could drag on for months or longer, but survival is already a struggle. The CBC's Margaret Evans begins our coverage showing us the distressing reality for those trapped in Gaza.
No end in sight to Gaza's pain, burying itself ever deeper into the hearts of those who suffer it. This is how the grieving now say their farewells in Khan Yunis, at a hospital where the morgue is overwhelmed, clutching the shoes of someone now dead and wrapped in a shroud, or at the arm of someone who's also hurting. Israeli ground forces have been moving closer to the center of Khan Yunis, telling Palestinians living nearby to move for their own safety, prompting yet another exodus of uncertainty. We fled because of the bombing, says Mohammed Sayyam. We're heading to Rafah, hoping it will be safe, but I doubt it. We're not affiliated with Hamas, Fatah, or Islamic Jihad, says this father, also heading for Rafah with a blind daughter. In Rafah, sanctuary is but an idea for those charged with civil defense, the ambulance and emergency workers called out after airstrikes. The hardest part is when you see a kid under the rubble or a child in pieces, says Haitham Al-Khams. You see women and children without weapons, he says. No fault in the conflict except that they exist on this land. The UN Secretary General has renewed his call for an immediate ceasefire, despite Washington's veto of a resolution to that effect at the UN Security Council on Friday. But Israel's Prime Minister says a ceasefire isn't compatible with Israel's goal of destroying Hamas, and he thanked the United States for sending ammunition. Ammunition important to the continuation of the war, he says. The World Health Organization says the war's impact on Gaza has been catastrophic, while the UN's World Food Programme has warned that half of Gaza's population is now starving. And there are increasingly desperate scenes in Rafah when aid trucks are allowed to cross over from Egypt. Scenes like these. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Jerusalem.
In the wake of the ongoing violence in the Middle East, faith groups from across Metro Vancouver came together today with a collective call for peace. As Janella Hamilton reports, some spiritual leaders say uniting as one is critical given the steep and widespread rise of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia.
Uniting in the face of unimaginable devastation and disheartening division. Dozens of people from the Muslim, Jewish, and Christian faiths gathering under one roof Sunday with one common goal.
Regardless of our religious background, regardless of our teachings, we must come together as one and promote love for all, hatred for none, and call for a ceasefire in the Middle East where innocent people are losing their lives on a daily basis.
Rabbi Laura Duhan Kaplan says the message of global peace and hope in times of darkness is especially significant this week as thousands of people mark Hanukkah.
We're seeing violence, harassment, bullying, vandalism, other kinds of hate crimes. And I think it is very, very important for spiritual leaders and religious leaders in Canada to stand together.
BC's Human Rights Commissioner says the violence overseas has sparked a surge of discrimination toward Jewish and Muslim people in this province. Vancouver police alone have reported 18 hate incidents aimed at the Jewish community, while the National Council of Canadian Muslims says the past few months have been the worst in decades for Islamophobia.
We know that Hamas did an unfortunate act which goes against the teaching of Islam. That goes without saying, but the action that is being taken on afterwards is the cause of concern.
Sunday's gathering at the Beitar Rahman Mosque in Delta began with prayers led by each faith leader.
In times of distress, let us respond.
Followed by a panel discussion where community members were given a platform to ask questions and share their concerns.
There's a lot of heartache seeing what's going on in the Middle East. So together, as we come together, shake our hands, give hugs, and I think come to some sort of not conclusion, but ideas on how we can help our community through this crisis.
Batty says this event is one of many happening in cities across Canada. He hopes by uniting various faith groups as the war drags on, it will stem the tide of polarization and serve as a small step toward the ultimate hope of peace in the Middle East. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Delta.
Well, thousands of people on Vancouver Island lost power this weekend thanks to yesterday's storm. Northern parts of the island were hit particularly hard. Some residents waited 12 hours to get their power back. Crews also worked to restore electricity for people on the southern Gulf Islands as well. BC Hydro says all of that power has since been restored. Well, concerns are rising about the mental health of firefighters. In Vancouver, the union says emergency calls have nearly doubled since 2019, and if changes aren't made, many more will burn out. As Yasmin Gandam is finding out, it's also making some think twice about becoming a first responder.
Very exciting, super exciting. That's part of our training today.
Captain Steve Farina has been working as a firefighter since 1997, but he says he's never seen demand this high and mental well-being this low in his team.
We're a pretty stoic audience, so we just suck it up and we do soldier on and we respond to the calls with compassion as much as we can. But there's definitely a fatigue there. There's definitely burnout.
Farina says he does what he can to support his staff, but the fight is far from over.
If you don't resource them and take care of them or hire additional staff to take that burden off, we are going to burn them out.
The Vancouver Firefighters Union says they are responding to 20% more calls than they were just a year ago.
We will break records for the number of overdose incidents that we respond to and smash all records regarding the number of fires. Fires in Vancouver have increased nearly double since 2019.
Lack says they are looking for more support from the city, including a boost in staffing levels to meet the overwhelming demand. He adds the ongoing toxic drug crisis has also played a role in their well-being. The union says they have responded to 1,000 more overdose calls compared to last year.
It's unsustainable for firefighters to be faced with seeing that type of despair and devastation on a daily basis.
The ongoing concern, not enough people are willing to enter the field, and the recruitment process is becoming increasingly difficult as the circumstances continue to be more taxing for those on the front lines.
We're really in an era where firefighter increased risks of cancers, obviously distressing exposures, and just the compounding impact of work and life for all of us is really taking a toll on the profession in general.
He says the department does have staff committed to the well-being of firefighters and services to access mental health professionals, but it's not enough.
If they're an abnormal event by our standard, they're abnormal events that would paralyze or petrify many members in society.
For firefighters like Farina, they continue to support the community, but are sounding the alarm on what they are calling a crisis. Yasmin Gandam, CBC News, Coquitlam.
Well, BC and Ottawa have come up with a 3-year plan to address gender-based violence. The federal government is earmarking nearly $62 million in an effort to end stigma and expand supports.
We need to address wait lists of programs that are working really well for people. We also know that there were voices that may or may not have felt represented previously in the conversations, and now they truly are in a substantial way.
The program also addresses calls to action from the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. More than half of the new funding will go towards Indigenous-led initiatives. The money will also boost programs for survivors, ramp up prevention campaigns, along with 24/7 crisis lines. Well, the local post office remains a vital service for many in rural Canada, a staple that increasingly is under threat, though. Our Yvette Bren shows us at how one community beat the odds and why others across the country may not be so lucky.
For a tiny 500-person town on BC's Yukon border, the post office is a lifeline.
Atlin is at the end of a 100-kilometer road that doesn't go anywhere else. You know, we need to drive 2 hours to get to a city from here, and that's where the next post office is.
That city, Whitehorse, is where some traveled just to get their mail after Atlin's post office burned down last year. Eventually, a temporary post office was set up in the town's old morgue. During that time, people couldn't send mail from Atlan or even buy stamps. This baker missed a longtime friend's wedding. The invitation took 5 months to arrive.
Our mail service is extremely terrible.
But Atlan isn't the only rural community with post office problems.
What we're seeing is a loss of a really vital federal service in communities where people depend on the post office.
Rural offices in Atlan, Telegraph Creek, BC, Langdon, Alberta, Windsor and Maberly, Ontario, Brooklyn, Nova Scotia and Bell River, PEI have closed in the past year or are at risk of closing. As financial pressures have increased and people send fewer packages, Canada Post has closed about 380 offices across the country since the 90s. In a statement, it says, the closure of rural or urban post offices may occur from time to time, often due to reasons beyond our control. We work hard to recruit a new postmaster and or find a new location, but in some cases we aren't successful.
The post office has moved.
Atlan is a rare success story. Its new post office a relief for the town, says the new postmaster.
You just have to have a place where you can go and get your mail, get your medications. Every community needs a place where they can go to get their business done.
And I really hope that Canada Post will find a way to keep the post office alive everywhere.
A hope shared by thousands of Canadians who rely on them. Yvette Bren, CBC News, Vancouver.
To Kamloops now, about 50 workers at a Hudson's Bay store have walked off the job. The union representing workers at the store in Aberdeen Mall says they've been in talks since July but have not been able to reach a wage agreement. They say the retailer did not budge on its proposal of a 1% wage increase for each year of the contract.
They also said that they value their employees, but an increase of 17 cents an hour is not, I don't consider that to be valuable to them.
A Hudson's Bay spokesperson says the company regrets the disruption at the Kamloops store, adding they remain committed to the bargaining process. This is the second time this location has gone on strike, by the way. The last time was when they unionized in 1993. Well, he bought a ticket as a bit of a favor. It was for a hospice fundraiser in Prince George with a very big prize, a brand new home. Well, turns out the winner seemed to be the very last person to find out that he'd actually won the house. We caught up with him to hear his story.
Juan Pablo Silva Perez, you are the new owner of a beautiful home on Monroe Drive. Congratulations.
Honestly, when I bought the ticket, I just kind of always thought about, especially because it's a hospice ticket, you know, always trying to help out a little bit. I went to Canadian Tire, I think it was one day, and then I just saw the table and I was like, oh man, and I think the lady already knew me and she was like, JP, are you gonna buy one? And I was like, yeah, I'll buy one this year. You know, one of those Fridays where you just want to unwind, and I just met up with my friends and we were being pretty nerdy and playing a board game, and I was the one setting it up and I put my phone face down and I was trying to, just hang out with my friends, and I look up at my phone and I must have had, I don't know, like 60 missed calls, a ton of missed messages, and my stomach dropped, and I just looked at my friend and I was like, Mark, I think something really bad happened. And
After leaving a message, you can hang up. Hi, Juan. This is Donna Flood, the Executive Director of the Hospice Palliative Care Society. I'm hoping that you can give me a call. I've got some information for you that I think will make your weekend.
I called Sandra from hospice because she's the one that messaged me, and because I still, I saw my I don't know, I kept telling myself there's a scam, like there's no way that it's my ticket. And I called her, and she started talking, and she was like, hey JP, you won. How does it feel to be the new hospice winner? Like, we're so happy for you. And she's talking, and I broke down on the other side of the phone. I don't know, it was pretty emotional, and she's talking to me, and I didn't answer, obviously, because I'm trying to I couldn't even talk. The moment that I talked, I knew I was going to cry. And she's like, hello, JP, are you there? And all I could say was, I'm happy. And I broke down. And what's really funny? There was so many people trying to call me. Like, my whole siblings in Mexico knew before me. People that I didn't know added me on Facebook. They're trying to tell me, like, contractors that I used to work with when I was with the brew house as a general manager were trying to call me. And
how long was your phone off?
For about an hour and a half.
It wasn't even that long.
No, and when they called, so when I saw the posting of the video, or when they were calling, it was like maybe 3 minutes after I started playing the board game. So like, there was a good hour and 20 minutes where people were trying to get a hold of me, and I was just, I don't know, I was just hanging out with a friend playing a board game.
Welcome back. Let's take you overseas. China and the Philippines traded accusations today after a collision this weekend between two vessels in the disputed waters of the South China Sea. The Philippine government says a Chinese Coast Guard boat acted illegally and aggressively by firing water cannons at resupply vessels. It also says a boat was rammed and left with serious damage. China, meanwhile, is blaming the Philippine vessel for purposely causing the collision. China claims almost the entire South China Sea. In several areas, the Philippines and 4 other countries dispute that claim. Well, the Nobel Peace Prize was presented today. It went to an Iranian rights activist, but she was not able to give her acceptance speech. As the CBC's Jamie Strachan explains, she remains imprisoned for the very activism that won her the award in the first place.
Nargis Mohammadi was not in Oslo to collect her Nobel Peace Prize, an empty chair in her place.
Nargis Mohammadi has not been released to come to Oslo.
Mohammadi is thousands of kilometers away, serving a 10-year sentence in Tehran's notorious Evin prison. Her teenage children accepted the award in her place. Her daughter read from a letter smuggled out of prison.
Nous sommes engagés dans une lutte.
We are in a struggle to stay alive. This is our reality. We live that struggle consciously and voluntarily, taking action that may not guarantee a safe life. Mohammadi has been in jail almost continuously since 2010 for fighting against the oppression of Iranian women. Her letter recalled Mahsa Amini, the young Kurdish woman whose death last year at the hands of Iran's morality police triggered protests across Iran and around the world. She wrote that Amini's death transformed the streets and public spaces into a place of widespread civil resistance. Lily Porzand, whose parents are also currently jailed in Iran, says Mohammadi deserves the Nobel recognition.
This is a collective effort, and Nargis Mohammadi's sacrifice is the well-deserved one to receive it and to be the symbol of this award and be the voice of all those who didn't have the voice.
Unfortunately, I can't say that the situation in Iran has gotten better in the past year.
Experts say despite the resistance, the regime maintains a tight grip on Iranian society.
Its survival was on the line, and so it met the protests with extreme brutality, as was to be expected. And the situation of women in Iran remains abhorrent.
I hope one day.
Activists like Mohammadi have spent their lives fighting for change and paying the price for doing so. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, CBC's The Early Edition is holding a contest to find BC's favorite holiday song. It's in honor of a UK tradition where artists compete to have the #1 spot on the charts on Christmas Day. So we asked Vancouverites to tell us, or rather sing us, in some cases, their favorite holiday songs.
It's beginning to look like Christmas.
Our radio show, The Early Edition, is holding a contest to find the best holiday music. So we're out here today asking people, what's your favorite holiday song?
Deck the Halls is like an absolute classic. Deck the halls with bells of jolly, fa la 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 la.
It's the season to be jolly, fa la 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 la.
Little Saint Nick by the Beach Boys.
Yes, I was about to say.
Let's go.
Yep, that's it.
Just a little bobsled.
Jingle bell, jingle bell,
Jingle Bell rocks.
Jingle bells swing and jingle.
Have yourself a merry little Christmas. This is cozy. Have yourself a merry little Christmas.
I'm in town working on the Nutcracker, so the entire soundtrack to that. It's
No Mariah Carey for you?
can't say so, no, unfortunately.
All I want for Christmas is you.
Mariah Carey.
Mariah Carey, easy. Easy.
All I want for Christmas is you. Okay.
So what's your favorite holiday song? You can vote on the poll online.
We're sharing really important information with the public, and I feel like this is exactly what our job is, especially as the public broadcaster, especially in morning radio. That's incredibly important.
And time for our full look at the forecast. Certainly not as exciting as we were yesterday, but let's see what our overnight lows are doing. I want to pinpoint a Kelowna Kamloops area. Average overnight low for this time of year is -7. Only around that freezing mark, so certainly not as cold as we're used to for this time of year. Same thing for Prince George, -11 is where we're usually at for this time of year. So certainly above average with that latest system that's moved through, bringing all that rain. We've pretty much dried out. Take a look. Dry conditions for the next few days. Midweek, Wednesday, that's when that next pulse of rain comes through with another low pressure system. It'll start targeting the north coast, slide down across the central coast, and eventually by Wednesday hit the south coast as well. But until then, including tomorrow, we'll stay dry across most of the province. In the south portion of BC as well as when we can see some precipitation likely. But again, as we hover around that 0 mark, it might fall as snow or rain or more likely sleet. But those snow showers will taper off through the day tomorrow if they are still around at all. Here's the 5-day forecast for Metro Vancouver. As we said, some lingering showers for Monday, but that's just in the morning. We'll see some breaks of sun over the next couple of days. And again, Wednesday is when we'll see that rain return. Otherwise, right where we should be for this time of year. And that is your late news for this Sunday, December 10th. For news anytime, anywhere, download the free CBC News app. You can always find us online as well. We're at cbc.ca/BC. Thank you so much for watching this weekend. Have a great night.